Alright, today we're going to react to an artist called Hamrib Art. So that's her YouTube channel, so let's take a look. So she's just put her uploads. She hasn't really organized her homepage. You could do an intro video. Intro, you can do one for your newest members. So you can say, hey, I'm XYZ. I do drawing, painting, or watercolor, or whatever. And then for your existing customers, you can kind of do probably your latest painting or drawing or whatever. So she just have uploads. I think she does have playlists. So she's organized playlists, but she hasn't organized the homepage, so that's a little strange. She has a pretty big channel. There's no YouTube banner across as well, so that's kind of another little missing thing. I mean, she has 123,000 subscribers, so she's doing well. Obviously, she has a great technique, so that's carrying her forward besides these small little flaws in YouTube. So go to the first video. This one is called Drawing Faces Tutorial. So she has a really nice intro. She pulls open a handbook, so kind of telling a little bit of a story there. She's showing the material.
Hey everyone,
great drawing.
Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about how I draw faces. I've already did a drawing portraits video, but that was more on drawing from reference photos. This updated one, we're still going to use reference photos, but I'm also going to talk more about how I build up the structures of the face and the head, so we can then use.
So it's a really cool intro. She starts with the sketchbook, and then she opens it and kind of shows some of her sketches from, you know, portraits of the head and also the eyes. She's kind of doing the details, so she's doing a lot of drawing studies, so it's really nice. She hasn't introduced herself one-on-one on the camera, which I would encourage. I think that would bond a little bit better with the audience. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit.
The shape will then represent the chin and the lower jaw. Usually it's about the same length as the center of the circle to the bottom. And let me just extend that horizontal line all the way across to the rest of the sphere. Then we can make another line that goes from the bottom of that circle across to the face, and that will be where the nose ends.
So these are kind of your classical ways of drawing if you don't use a scale divider. She kind of already has a good feel for proportions, so you kind of start with your basic shapes and slowly kind of hem in until you get all the shapes right and kind of where you're going to place the nose. And then she's going to kind of bring in the shading, so that's kind of an interesting way to bring about it. I'm going to pull this a little bit forward here.
It will end up looking like the person is wearing large sunglasses, and then that will make it easier for us to place where the eyeballs are. What most beginners like I did forget is that the features of the face really is just centered on this front of the head. So we have to remember to leave out space before we reach her scalp and her ears. And now we have this rectangle for the front plane of the forehead, and then we can then add the space for her mouth. A lot of people say it's as wide as the nose or about as wide as the space between the eyes. But most of the time it's really not. It's a little bit wider than that. So I just connect lines from just outside of her nose and drag them down, and that will be how wide the mouth is.
So she's doing a nice top-down vision, and she's kind of explaining all the proportions you go through it. I think there's a really nice touch. She also has a little bit of music in the background to kind of carry forward the video, so I think that's really good. Let's kind of skip ahead a little bit here, and I'm going to check my fish. So she's doing a little bit closer detail.
These are all just different examples of different eyes. The first one is, I think, what we see most portrayed in drawings. They have the folds on the lower side for the eye bags and another set of folds on top for the double eyelid. I have found eyes with monolids like mine to be the hardest to draw, and recently I've discovered a way to draw them, and it's mostly in the shading that will highlight it best. I like to focus the shading right on the actual.
So I like that because she's kind of explaining European eyes, and then you're going to have the monolids, which is basically Asian eyes or Asian-like eyes. So that's a really cool detail. Let's skip ahead a little bit.
And also another good way to show variation on the noses is on the bridge of the nose. Some go in more and others will just look like they're going straight down, almost level with the brows. And that's how this guy's nose is. So now we are moving on to the lips.
So I think we got a good view. I'm going to actually skip to the rest because I think this is just it's very good, I think. But it's basically self-explanatory where this is kind of going to go, I think. So this next video is called My First Oil Painting Full Process from Priming to Varnish. Let's hit play. So like the kind of groovy music start. That's nice. Gonna show the palette, which is good. You get a feel for her colors. So it's kind of nice. She shows the real quick finished product. So
welcome back. Today I'm really excited to show you the process for my very first oil painting.
This was a perfectly good painting.
I want to preface this by saying that even though it is my first oil painting, I have been painting for years with gouache and watercolors. And I also tried acrylics for a little bit. I just didn't really.
Oh man, this is so wrong. It's like a perfectly good painting. I understand if the proportions are off or something, but it's like, why would you destroy a perfectly good painting? Let me go check my fish.
End up liking it.
So I'm gonna skip ahead. That's just astonishing. She painted that painting over
to my canvas after. So after I did that I was waiting for my oil paints to arrive, I actually read on Reddit that graphite doesn't interact well with the oil paints. So after I had the rough sketch, I actually used some acrylics to seal the graphite onto the canvas. And it's just some regular acrylics that I watered down.
So it's nice you get to actually view from the back, kind of see her painting, so that's nice. And that is smart to kind of pencil it in. You can actually just start with the acrylic and just kind of water it down and just paint it in rapidly. You don't need to be super exact with a pencil and then kind of go over it again. That's kind of repetitive, so that's kind of an easier way to work. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
This tiny part of the painting. But I really don't regret it, even while I was working on it and I was noticing how long this was going to take me to do. I was still having a lot of fun with it. The point of this was to get to know the medium at first, in this first day, so that's what I was doing. And I was also having fun while I was doing that.
You can see she's a really highly accomplished. She really works from just kind of basically sketch it in, and then she's just feel highly detailed and then slowly build it out. That's kind of an interesting way to work. I don't work like that at all. I would do the big blocks and then kind of slowly tighten in the detail. So it's interesting to work this way. I think with oil it's a little bit easier because you have all the time in the world, so you can just kind of play around with the colors and everything. But she has a great understanding of realism. And let me check my fish. So let's skip ahead a little bit more.
Or if it's just a quality to oil paints, but the colors just remain very clean. So usually it's hard for me to mix lighter colors with gouache because they're very easy to contaminate. But with oil paints, I find it really easy to mix these lighter colors. So as long as I know that my brush is clean completely before I mix.
Yes, I would use a way bigger brush to block it in. But
mix my colors, I know I'm gonna be.
She knows what she's doing, so
the exact color that I want with it for day 2. And also,
so skip ahead a little bit.
I'm using this and also a little bit of me mixing my paints. I'm just using this old sheet of glass that I saw under my neighbor's house, so it's really raw and it's not really very safe. I think I've cut my thighs while I was working with this, so definitely do not recommend. Just go ahead and get like. So
it's kind of a nice detail seeing the mixing. Skip ahead a little bit.
Wait so long for it to dry and for me to be able to work on those details off of this.
So now she's painting the big blocky, which is interesting.
Yet again, I just really needed to have a good foundation that I can carve out and refine later on. But this part was also just so fun. I could play around.
It's almost cool to leave it like this, where it's very rough and you go to the high detail.
Just because I wasn't too concerned with any of the details. But by this point, I was sort of already accepted waiting as a big part of the process with oil paints. I kind of wish I had worked with other stuff while I was working on this, but I really don't like working on multiple stuff while another painting is waiting. But I actually did try, and most of those little paintings failed just because I couldn't focus on them. So I felt like I was wasting a lot of time just waiting for this to dry before I could move on. But
yeah, and that's one of the challenges. I do encourage people to work one painting by one painting. You get a really high quality product then, versus doing kind of a series. Sometimes I'll do a series of 4 and I'll do like one layer and come back, but it's all the same topic, so I'm not too disoriented. But I totally get what she's saying. If you do multiple projects at the same time, you can be all over the place. This is how I worked when I first started, and I would do abstracts all together, and I would be like, I'll just use this green over here, and it really didn't make sense to use it in another painting, but I just did it because I had the paint out. So I would encourage people not to work that way. So I think working one by one is good. But in oil, it's a challenge because it's every layer is a week. So you could just waste 6 weeks doing this one painting.
My watercolors, so I was really happy that it worked almost the same way with oil paints. I really love that it melts off right where you want it to, and it just leaves this cast of colors.
Yeah, you can really do really.
It's just so satisfying.
Very nice subtle things
I'm using
in oil.
A very little amount of oil paint. Most of this is actually.
Yeah, so that's one of the beauties of oil color. You can do these really thin. I can't do the fish in the middle of this. All right, we just finished the fish. Yeah, I don't think I'd recommend doing a painting tutorial in the middle of cooking fish and rice.
Just because it's positioned that way. But when I looked at it, when I took a step back and looked at it, I feel like the attention was too high up. So what I wanted to do was drag the eyes a little bit lower down and centered on the canvas. That's why I just decided last minute to add her necklace in.
It does
So
have
after
a nice
I
touch to
did
pull
all
down.
that, finally just finishing it up, I've left some of the details like her eyebrows and her eyelashes towards the end because those are the hardest for me. And also just darkening up the background, waiting for it to be ready for varnishing.
Oh, really beautiful eyes with the green mixed with orange. Like, there I'd use a bigger brush. Like really like an inch brush maybe, and then detail it down, but she's obviously a great painter, so really amazing details
So for
here.
this last and final step, I actually just waited 3 days for it to be touch dry.
All right, I think it's a really good painting. Let's go on to the next one. This is a watercolor painting process. So I like how she just starts kind of in the middle of the drawing. Like amazing proportions and sensual and sexual look in the eyes of the girl on the paper. Kind of show off the materials you're going to use. She has her color study, which is really important to do. You get a feel for all the colors.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm gonna walk you through the process that I have for this painting. I loved working on this thing so much. I think it's because I really missed my watercolors. And I know some of you guys have been asking me to do more watercolor videos, so here it is. I'm using a mix of brushes and I'm going to be leaving all of their names in the description. And also I'm using a mix of colors that are actually from 3 different brands. And I didn't mean to do that. I really wasn't thinking on this time. The first thing I did was make sure my paper is fully saturated with water. Making sure it swatches really helps me avoid those harsh lines when they dry, and you can see that the colors just melt into each other when I do this, and the paint just spreads out onto the paper this way, and I really think it's beautiful the way it does that. This process also helps me figure out the colors in my palette, because this stage helps me see the colors in the actual painting, and it helps me place them without me needing to worry about the details. So after I do that and I figured out where to place my colors, I'm going with the wet on dry. So this time I'll have more of those hard edges where the paint has dried. And I actually really like this look for watercolors. If you want more of a blended out look, just take your clean brush and just work those edges out with water. That will give you a more blended out clean look. But for my
skip a little bit
before I could work on them with my watercolors. And then I'm using a different brush, but this one is also has soft bristles, but it just gives me a little bit more control than the silver black velvet one. And on this stage, I'm really just mapping out where I want the shadows to be. Later on, when I need to paint those smaller strands, I will be needing a more stiff synthetic brush, but on this one, that's what I'm using.
It's a very nice build up here.
If you're going for a piece like this that's using a lot of different layers, maybe you want to use your brands that aren't very opaque, like Sinolie, which is the oranges that I'm using for this piece. Also, my jello colors are good, but the colors I'm using are mostly opaque, like the White Nights and the watercolor confections one. I could have planned that out earlier on better. And I'm also adding
skip
more.
ahead just a little bit here. Very, very good painting.
With the lighting, especially, the colors don't look as intense as before, and the texture of the paper creates this, it sort of looks like there's a filter over everything, so it almost looks like it's evening the values out, which I don't know, but I really like it this time. I really like the look of it, and I just like this effect that it's giving me.
It's interesting she didn't preserve the white, but it looks very, very white. So
those smaller strands of hair, and I don't really know, but it didn't feel right while I was doing this. Something just felt off. I don't know what it is, but I think I just don't like having too much details for her hair. It's not usually the style that I'm going for. So while I did kind of enjoy that part a little, I think towards the end I went over the...
So scroll a little bit ahead. Very excellent painting here. It's like, wow.
So
especially
after that stage, I am
just brings the white.
Using my gouache to finish the piece off. And actually choosing the colors with the gouache, it's a lot harder than I thought, because I really needed to get the exact colors that I was using with the watercolors. I don't want things to stand out with the gouache. So on some parts of her hair, I made some of those strands more of a pinkish color, so I had to go over them later on with a lot more yellow. But I really liked the effect that I did for the left side of her hair. I really liked that I just painted the highlights over highlights, so I really like that effect.
Yeah, and this is if you go to watercolor place, there'll be a competition. It'll be a watercolor, gouache doesn't count, and then you're like, whatever, man, it's just a good painting. And so this is a really good technique. You just add the white back in at the end. You don't have to worry about preserving the white and having those perfectly laid out. That's how pure kind of watercolors. They would consider this at a watercolor competition. They would consider this kind of mixed media. I think you just go for a good looking painting, you know. And if the materials are similar, like wash and watercolor kind of overlap a little bit as far as the effects, I mean, I would just go with it. So don't worry about that. I would just use her techniques and don't worry about the purest watercolor.
It was really hard for me to figure it out, but I think that was the look that I was going for in the end. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I have scraped off a lot more of the hair strands that I painted before for the shadowed parts of her hair. Before I did the same thing that I did for her left side. So it ended up looking good. I really liked the result. What did you guys think? I hope you enjoyed.
That's really good painting. And let's see. And the weird thing is, I went and looked for a website. Maybe it exists and I'm just not finding it. But I'm only seeing an Instagram account. And I'm seeing a Pinterest account. Obviously, she's selling more to the female skew. Women are going to buy this more, but male like to buy it too. But I bet her audience is much more female. Mine is more masculine. It makes sense. But I think even though Instagram and Facebook are very, very hot for artists, I would not recommend only not having a website because stuff does disappear. MySpace disappeared. I had a huge MySpace account. That's gone. I'm still on Flickr, but that's kind of passé now because the popularity of Instagram passed it up, Facebook passed it up, but Flickr used to be the hot site. So those social media, what's popular changes over time. So my recommendation is have a little bit of finger in a couple of different ones. So if one dies off, you're not like, oh shit, and then make sure you stay on top of the new ones. Obviously, TikTok's huge if you don't have anything to do with the Chinese government. If you're just doing pure landscape portrait, it's fine. I do a little political art, so I can't really be on there because the Chinese government will just shut it down probably instantly or just wait till it gets big and then kill it. So there's kind of no point for me on that. But yeah, just keep ahead of the curve and stay on all those different platforms. But always have a website because you want to gather those emails. It's old school and people think, oh, I don't need all that, spend all that money. And you can just sell out of Instagram. I sell off of Facebook purely. But those platforms can kick you off. I've been kicked off Facebook. I've been blocked on my Facebook ads account 3 times. On Twitter, I've been blocked 3 times, had the account shut down for a whole week, and I have like literally 12,000 fans there. So it's easy to get in trouble with these social media platforms. The standards change over time. You might be within the rules, and then later you break the rules and you don't know, and then all of a sudden they turn your account off. So it's not wise not to have a website, even if you're a really great artist like this, and it's a very neutral topic where you're painting girls and landscapes, and there's nothing offensive about that, right? But you can still get in trouble. Who knows? She does a contest too many, or who knows what. So, or it's too sexual at some point. They're like, block that, it's porn or whatever. So yeah, I would always encourage people to have a website. You don't have to put much into it. You can use almost a free website where it's just minimum on there and just kind of as your outpost. But you can custom design your website exactly how you want it. And if you're on Instagram, they're going to share it right next to your competition. So this girl being on Instagram is great, but then people find her competition right next to her. Same with Facebook, they find her competition right next to her. So it's easy to get distracted and mix up you're like, oh, I like this artist. Oh, this artist is good too. And then you end up buying your competition. You don't buy you. Why is it on your website? It's only you or whatever you put on there. So you can really tighten that niche down and just have all your social media kind of pull into that website. And maybe you don't sell there, but you kind of have your own presentation, how you want to present things. Maybe you have a couple of email magnets and gather leads that way. But yeah, I would always encourage people to have a website. So it's kind of scary she doesn't have a website. Maybe she had one before and skipped it because she's selling more on Instagram, which I get. Who wants to maintain multiple things, especially if one sells and another one doesn't. But I still would have a website overall in the end product. Maybe you have a really simple website and you have most of your product on Instagram, Facebook. But it's just, you're leaving yourself open to something crashing in the future. Definitely one of those social media is going to die off. It's almost guaranteed. Nothing's gonna guaranteed in the future. Flickr's a very small account now. Pinterest is not as big as it used to be. Tumblr is way down the list. I was big on Tumblr before too, and now it's kind of a has-been. Snapchat kind of was huge for a while, and then it dried off. So it's very dangerous to only be in one or two social media. You want to be kind of broad-based, be in multiple accounts. Maybe you don't maintain them as much, but if one goes away, you just start focusing a little bit more on one or another, and you have the website as kind of the key post in case everything falls apart. So I would not encourage you not to have a website. It's just, you're setting yourself up for failure in the future because things do fail. Websites go down, people get bought, and they close down stuff. I don't see anyone shutting down Facebook or Instagram anytime soon, but a better product could come out, and then artists jump ship and move to that, and then you spend a lot of time here, and then your fan base is stuck on Instagram, and you can't pull them off. Whereas if you had your Instagram and you kind of filtered them down to your website and get them on your newsletter, you can transfer them onto the next social media platform, so to say. So that's my take. I would recommend her. You can definitely learn. She has really great technique, pretty good video technique, I'd say as well. If you'd like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you on the next artistry.